In this video, you're going to learn how you can insert documents into MongoDB. Now, at the end of the last video, we touched on that briefly by using insert1 to insert our very first document, but in this video, we'll dive into insert1 in a bit more detail, and you'll also learn how you can insert multiple documents at the exact same time. This video also includes a challenge where you're going to have to insert some documents into a brand new collection. Let's go ahead and kick things off by continuing our discussion of insert1. As you likely guessed, insert1 is not synchronous. It is indeed asynchronous. Now, currently, we don't have a callback registered because it's not completely necessary for the data to actually get inserted. But it is necessary if we want to handle errors or confirm that our operation worked as expected. So this is something we definitely want to do in a production application. Right here, we're going to pass a second argument to insert1, a callback function, which is going to get called when the operation is complete. Now, the callback function for insertions gets called with one of two potential arguments. We either have the error if things went poorly, or we have the result if things went well. Now, the result contains some interesting information, including the operation result, so that's going to contain our data, as well as the unique ID that was assigned to the document. So let's go ahead and actually fill out the callback function down below to do something meaningful. I'm going to set up an if condition to check if there is an error. If there is one, I will return while printing a message like we've done up above for connection errors. And right here, I'll just say something like unable to insert user. Let's go ahead and spell insert correctly though. Now, if things did go well, the code down below will run, and we're going to dig into result. There's basically only one property on result we're ever going to end up using, and that is ops, O-P-S. This contains all of the documents that were inserted, in this case, just one. So let's go ahead and dump that to the console. Console.log result.ops. So right here, we are printing ops, which is an array of documents, in this case, an array with just one document inside. Now, what I'm going to do is save MongoDB.js with our callback function in place, and from the terminal, we'll restart things. I'll use Control-C to shut it down, and the up arrow key and Enter to restart it, and right here, we can see that basically instantly, we're getting our output from the insert1 operation. I have an array with a single object inside since we inserted just a single document, and we have three properties. I have name, Andrew, age, 27, and our underscore ID property with a unique identifier for that document. Now, if you're wondering how I knew that result has ops, this is where the API documentation comes into play. The documentation for this particular module, the MongoDB NPM module, is quite extensive and it's super useful. So over in the browser, we had pulled that up a bit earlier in the other tab. It was this documentation. On the left-hand side, we have all sorts of interesting things. So for example, if I scroll down to M, we have Mongo Client. If I click on that, we can learn how to use it. And one of the methods on Mongo Client is connect, which we already used. If I click on that, it talks about exactly how we can use connect. So we have the URL as that first argument. Then we have options as the second argument. You can see all of the options available right here and what exactly they do. And then down below, near the bottom of that list of options, we can see we also pass in a callback function. Now, for our purposes, using insert1, we don't want to look at Mongo Client. We want to scroll down to collection. When we go to collection, we're going to be brought over to the documentation for that. And under methods, we have all of the collection methods we can access, including the one that we've used, insert1. I'm going to click on that so we can view the documentation for it. We can see that the first argument is the document to insert. We've already provided that. The second argument is an optional options object, which we have left off. And the third argument all the way down at the bottom, this is our callback. Now, if you want to learn more about how callback is going to function when using insert1, there's a link right here you can follow to see what arguments your callback is going to get called with. I click it, it brings me over to the documentation for that. I get an error, and I get a result. And those are the two arguments we've set up for our callback in insert1. So that is where these two come from. They come from the documentation. Now you're wondering what exactly is on result or error for that matter. Well, you can click those to see what you get. Right here, I'm going to click next to result to bring me over to the documentation for that. And here I can view the 5 properties I have access to when working with result, including the one we used, ops. I can see ops is an array, and that array contains all of the documents that have been inserted, and it lists out some various methods, including insert1, which is the one that we've just used. We also have other properties available, but none of them contain any particularly useful information. The only ones you might end up using are inserted count, which contains the number of documents inserted, and inserted ID, which contains the ID of the document you inserted. But as we've already seen, that ID is also available on ops, since we're seeing it over here when we dump ops to the console. So this is insert1 in a nutshell. It allows you to insert a single document into a collection. Now we're going to go ahead and comment this code out, and we're going to look at how we can bulk insert documents. Instead of inserting just one user, we're going to insert 2 at the exact same time. For this, we will once again need to get a reference to the collection. That's db.collection, passing in the collection name. I still want to insert into that user's collection, so let's type it out exactly. Then, instead of using insert1, we're going to go ahead and use insert many. Now, insert many is also listed over in the documentation. So once again, we want to look at the documentation for collection, go to methods, and then go down to I for insert many, and it's sitting right here just before insert one. We can click that to learn how it's used. Right here, it expects the first argument to be an array of documents to insert. Then we have our options, which we're not going to specify, and down below we have our callback. So using the documentation, we can get a feel for exactly how this works. Over inside of MongoDB.js, let's go ahead and use it. I'm going to call insert many, passing in an array for that first argument, and we're going to provide 2 new users. Right here, I'll go ahead and add another user with the name Jen, and I'll set her age equal to 28. And then we can add a second object to this array to insert a second document at the same time. Right here, a second object, name, I'll go ahead and use Gunther. And for age, I'll go ahead and use 27. So the following insertion will insert 2 documents as opposed to just inserting the one. Now let's go ahead and set up that callback function once again. So right here, after the closing for the array, the second argument is going to be that callback function. And once again, we can refer to the documentation to figure out how things work. And the reason I'm bringing you over to the docs so many times is that it's really important to get comfortable using them so you can explore new features and customize everything to fit your needs. So right here, insert many, we go down to callback, we click the option next to it to view what we get. We get an error and a result like we did before. And we can also click this to view what we have on the result. And right here, we have the same stuff. The only difference is that we have inserted IDs, plural, since we are writing multiple documents. Let's go ahead and actually fill out the callback. We're going to get a potential error and a potential result. And like we did above, we will handle that error. And right here, we're going to go ahead and print that message. I'll return and use console.log. Unable to insert documents as my message. And if things went well, I will just print ops, which is an array of the documents that were inserted. Right here, that would be console.log result.ops. Perfect. Let's go ahead and actually test things out. So I'm going to save MongoDB, and from the terminal, I'm going to shut things down. Now, before we actually run the program, I'm going to pull up Robo3T as well. That's sitting over here. And the last time we ran it, we had just a single document inside of there. I can go ahead and refresh the page by either right-clicking users and clicking View Documents, or using Command R or Control R, depending on your operating system. And here I can see that I do have two documents, the two users that I inserted with the exact same information, since I had ran the same insert one command twice. Now from here, we're going to actually run the new file with insert many getting called for the first time. Down below, up and enter to rerun the last command, and I can see that ops is an array with two documents. I have Jen, who's 28 with her unique ID, and I have Gunther, who's 27 with his unique ID. Over inside of Robo3T, I can refresh things to view those records as well, and now we have 4 documents in that user's collection. Now that you know how to use insert and insert many, it's time for a challenge. Over inside of MongoDB.js, I'm going to start by commenting out the call to insert many so it doesn't run when we rerun this file. And down below, I'm going to paste the challenge comments describing what I'd like you to do. I'll go ahead and indent these properly, making things easier to read. So your goal is to add some code right here inside of the connect callback. So right where we were adding our other calls to insert one and insert many. And your job is to insert 3 tasks into a new tasks collection. So we have the users collection with some data inside of there. You'll be creating that tasks collection and inserting some data. You're going to use insert many to insert, that should say 3 THREE documents. And for each document, you want to have a description, which will be a string, and a completed status. True if it's completed or false otherwise. For your 3 documents, make sure to have a few different completed values. As an example, make 2 completed and 1 incomplete, or make 2 incomplete and 1 complete. Switch things up a bit though. Next up, step 2. You want to set up the callback for your insert many call to handle any potential errors or to print the ops if things went well, similar to what we've done before. Then you're actually going to run the script, and finally, you're going to view the data in Robo3T. You can refresh the database to view the new collection, and you can view all of the data for that collection to make sure you're seeing your 3 tasks show up. Take as much time as you need to knock this out, test your work, and when you're done, come back and click play. How'd that go? Let's go ahead and kick things off. The first thing we need to do is use insert many. We know that we have to use db.collection to figure out which collection we're trying to insert the documents into. In this case, I've decided to call it tasks. Next up, on that collection, we'll be using insert many to insert many documents. In this case, we're going to insert 3. The first argument is the array of documents right here. Let's go ahead and set up 3 objects. I'm going to have my first object with a description, which will be a string, and I'm also going to have a completed value, and that's going to be a Boolean. True if the task is complete or false otherwise. Right here, let's go ahead and pick a task description for this one. I'll use something like clean the house, which we just did, so I can leave that as true. Then I'll go ahead and add a couple of other documents. So I have description. I'll go ahead and say renew inspection. I have not done that for my motorcycle, so that's going to be false. And one more document, the third document, description. I'll go ahead and say something like pot plants. I got some new plants for the office. Currently, they're not in their pots. I want to go ahead and fix that, but I haven't done it so far, so completed can be false. So here we have some dummy data. You could have picked any 3 description and completed values you liked. You did not need to have the same text as long as you had 3 objects with both description and completed. From here, we want to move on to step 2 and set up the callback to handle errors or to print the operation output. So I'll provide that callback as the second argument to insert many. We know we get error, and we know we get result. We're going to check if there is an error first. If error, what do? We'll go ahead and set up a code block to run, and we will use return to stop the function execution, and I'll use console.log to print a message, unable to insert tasks, or any other message would have worked. Next up, if things did go well, I just wanted you to print the operation output. which, as we've done before, is console.log printing result.ops. Excellent. So that is steps 1 and 2. Step 3 is to run the script. So I'm going to save the script. I'm going to shut down the existing process with Control-C, use up and enter to restart it. And right here, I can see that I have 3 items showing up in that ops array, which is coming from the console.log on line 68. I have cleaned the house, renew inspection, and pot plants showing up correctly, all with unique IDs. Now we can move on to the final step, which is step 4. We want to refresh the database and view our data. Before I do that, I'll remove the challenge comments since we're all done with them, and I'll shift over to Robo3T. Now here, we don't have the collection showing up, but if I right-click and click refresh, we can open up Task Manager, and we can now see we do have that second collection, tasks, and I can view the data inside of there. I'll right-click it, click View Documents, and right here, we have our 3 documents showing up. If I want to see them at a quick glance, I can switch over to that table view, and I can view all of them. I have IDs for all of them. I have the correct descriptions, and I have the completed values, everything showing up correctly. So there we go. We now know how to insert documents into the database. From here, we're going to talk about one of the other CRUD operations. So we've knocked out create, which is C. We're going to talk about read. How do we get documents out of the database so we can use them? We're going to talk about that in the next video. So let's go ahead and jump right in.